A millionaire exposes the truth after a stepmom pours milk on a little girl's heart. A transformation begins. Jessica wiped down the counter at the diner, her hands trembling slightly as she struggled to shake off the anxiety creeping at the edges of her mind. Just the day before, the owner had broken the news. "We're shutting down next week," he had said, his voice heavy with regret. This closure would rip apart the delicate fabric of her life. The prospect of facing Patricia again felt insurmountable. The woman had walked away years ago, deeming Jessica's humble existence beneath her. Now, with her job lost and the threat of losing custody of Lily looming like a dark cloud, the thought of that confrontation clawed at her insides. Every hour at the diner was a struggle, each interaction weighed down by the reality that she could no longer provide for her daughter as she'd vowed to do. She swallowed her fears but found them multiplying like weeds. Was it wrong to worry? Was it selfish to think that hard work and love might not be enough against the tidal wave of Patricia's influence? As Jessica staggered through the evening rush, sweat mingling with her mounting despair, she caught a glimpse of Lily, drawing quietly in the corner. Her daughter's bright imagination worked on paper while the world outside seemed to conspire against them. Every stroke of the crayon was a reminder of the innocence she fought to preserve. But the longer Jessica watched, the more despair nagged at her heart. What would happen to that bright smile if Patricia had her way? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her heart raced as the reality set in. Losing her job meant losing not just a paycheck, but stability for Lily. Eating ramen for dinner was one thing. But would Patricia allow any semblance of a life if it granted her the opportunity to pounce? An image flashed through her mind. A courtroom, a judge, Patricia's smooth, self-assured voice echoing lawsuits as she painted Jessica as unfit to care for her own child. Gritting her teeth, Jessica fought against the tightening knot in her stomach. Just then, the door to the diner swung open, and her breath caught in her throat at the sight of Patricia striding in, her expensive taste on full display. Jessica's world tilted perilously as she felt the weight of the air shift. Patricia's eyes scanned the room, dismissing the patrons as she honed in on Jessica and Lily. She had come to gloat, no doubt, sensing the vulnerability brimming in Jessica's heart. Encountering that cold, calculated power made Jessica's insides twist like raw meat in a grinder. A family reunion loomed, and the thought of it made her queasy. Would she allow Patricia to tear apart the fragile threads of their lives? The stakes had never been higher, yet with each passing moment, the pressure intensified. A storm brewed, and Jessica felt the wind shift against her. Her defiance could ignite a clash that swallowed everything she cherished. As she desperately plotted her next moves, the depth of her choices cast a shadow larger than she could comprehend, and as hope flickered, doubt threatened to engulf her entirely. What would happen if she lost this battle? What kind of mother would she fight for her child? Would her struggle drive the final wedge between them and Patricia's affluent grasp? The answers tangled uncomfortably in her mind, pushing her further into the abyss of uncertainty. The diner buzzed with laughter and chatter, but Jessica felt suspended in a different reality. Time appeared to slow, every second dragging out under the weight of her escalating fears. As Patricia strode toward her, flanked by the aura of privilege, Jessica's heartbeat quickened. She stood frozen, her muscles taut, every instinct screaming at her to retreat. But that path was no longer viable. There was too much at stake. "Jessica," Patricia's voice cut through the air, smooth yet laced with disdain. "I see business hasn't been good to you." The words dripped with contempt, a deliberate attempt to provoke. Jessica forced herself to meet Patricia's gaze, igniting the ember of her anger. It flickered in her chest, pushing against the icy dread, threatening to overwhelm her. "What do you want?" she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "We need to talk about Lily." Patricia's tone shifted, adopting a cold pragmatism that chilled Jessica further. "You're in no position to raise her with your current situation. I can help." "Help?" The word felt like a venomous bite. Jessica's mind raced. Help would come with strings attached, strings that could strangle her. "I'm not interested in your help. I can take care of Lily just fine." She clenched her fists, refusing to let Patricia see her quiver. Patricia chuckled, a subtle mockery of Jessica's resolve. "You think your job at this diner makes you a suitable mother? You're setting her up for a life of struggle. Think about what's best for her." The truth cut like a knife, pinpointing Jessica's fears with surgical precision. But she could not afford to show weakness. Struggle is part of life. She is happy with me. "Maybe you should ask her," Jessica countered, gesturing toward Lily, blissfully drawing in her own world, oblivious to the storm brewing nearby. "Exactly. Maybe isn't good enough. If you cared about her, you'd consider an alternative." Patricia's gaze sharpened, calculating and cold. Rage simmered within Jessica. Patricia was right, her world was uncertain, but surrendering to that cold, pragmatic approach wasn't an option. Each of Patricia's unstated threats and insinuations drove home the urgency for Jessica to reclaim her power. She wouldn't allow her daughter to be ripped away from her, not when they had fought so hard for a place in each other's lives. Yet, as the exchanges continued, a thought crept in her mind. Had there been signs of her own past decisions leading to this moment? Could she have charted a different course for both her and Lily? That self-doubt crackled alongside her anger, a potent cocktail of frustration. The conversation turned into a tactical chess match, with each player fighting to protect their piece on the board. Jessica knew she needed more than just bravado. She needed a plan, something to fortify her standing as a mother. Patricia leaned closer, her features sharpened by the diner's dim light. "You're still living in the past, Jess. I've built a life, one that can give Lily everything you cannot. I will take her if you let this continue." With every spoken thread, a cold shiver shot down Jessica's spine, but kindled her resolve. What if she leveraged this confrontation as the catalyst for change? What if she pinpointed her own skills and resources to turn her situation around? Jessica straightened her back, squaring her shoulders as she confronted the shadows of her past. She could no longer remain passive. She needed to take control. "Maybe it's time I took a good look at myself," she said, her voice now resolute, grounded in determination. "But don't mistake that for weakness. I will fight for Lily, no matter what." With that proclamation, Jessica felt a spark of nascent belief in her own capabilities. Perhaps this chaos could be her crucible, the transformative beginning she desperately needed. She would no longer be the one cornered. She would embrace the challenge. As Patricia's expression shifted from triumph to irritation, Jessica realized this was only the beginning of a far greater battle ahead. The next steps were critical. She needed to devise a strategy that would not only protect Lily, but also reveal her unrecognized strengths. Jessica's thoughts swirled with possibilities, igniting a new sense of urgency. She had to act swiftly, forge connections, and build a plan that could stand up against Patricia's power. But even as determination surged within her, the greatest question loomed. How would she turn this spark into a roaring fire? She needed to find a way to confront the layers of her own insecurities and confront Patricia not just as a mother, but as a woman determined to reclaim her life. What resources would prove indispensable in her quest for stability? And would she find allies in unexpected places, or would she stand alone in this fight? As the reality of her battle set in, the answers danced in front of her, elusive but critical. The familiar clatter of dishes and the smell of greasy fries enveloped Jessica like a comforting blanket, but her heart raced with an intensity she could hardly contain. She had faced countless challenges, but now, everything felt different. This confrontation with Patricia was just about defending her motherhood. It was the precipice of her transformation into a woman who could take control of her life. As she busied herself with the evening rush, an array of thoughts spiraled in her mind, each one pushing her toward a realization she had long denied. Despite having only her minimum wage job to support them, she had untapped potential that desperately needed to surface. Rendering donuts and coffee to the late-night crowd wasn't her endgame. It was just a chapter in her story. Jessica caught glimpses of Lily laughing with a couple of kids near their booth, a stark reminder of what was at stake. Protecting that joy fueled her resolve. She decided it was time to create a plan that went beyond surviving day-to-day at the diner. She could no longer afford to think small. The idea began to form in her mind. Drawing on her past experience at the cafe, she used to manage a bustling little place known for its specialty sandwiches and charming, loyal clientele. She realized she had skills she could leverage. She knew about menu planning, customer service, and the nerve-wracking pressure of managing a staff. If she could reclaim some aspect of that world, perhaps she could carve out a better life plan. But launching a new venture was daunting, especially with little savings and no safety net. Each prospect that tickled her imagination, however, came with its own set of fears. Would anyone support her? Could she find investors interested in a small cafe or a food venture backed by a single mother? Was it even reasonable to consider going into business? Doubt flared. Still, she chided herself for allowing it to cloud her judgment. Before doubt could settle in, she decided to take action. At the end of her shift, instead of heading home, she slipped into the local library. The air was stale, yet filled with the scent of worn pages and unspoken stories. Jessica sat down, armed with her notepad, and began to scrawl her ideas for a potential business plan. "I can start small," she murmured to herself, her determination sharpening with each new line she wrote. "Maybe a niche corner for specialty coffee and homemade pastries. Something unique that brings warmth and happiness, just like that cafe." The plan began to take shape along with a list of resources. She could tap into grants for women-owned businesses, mentorship programs, and possibly even crowdfunding from neighbors who wanted to support local initiatives. Each new idea cast aside the shadows of embarrassment she felt for her current situation. As she delved deeper into her ambitions, a familiar face emerged in her mind: Mr. Anderson, the former restaurant owner who had closed the diner years ago after health issues. He had once been a fatherly figure, full of advice and encouragement. Recalling their conversations rejuvenated her hope. Perhaps he could share guidance or even a connection to kickstart her journey. With newfound motivation churning within her, Jessica's phone buzzed at the edge of the table. It was a message from her friend Caroline, who helped out at the community center, offering a chance to discuss a small vendor market they were organizing. Caroline's excitement filtered through the text, offering Jessica another potential avenue to gain visibility and test her offerings without taking the full plunge. Jessica's heart raced again, not out of fear this time, but with the thrill of possibility. She blinked back tears, realizing this wasn't merely about making pastries. It was about survival, about creating a life where she thrived, not just survived. The approaching conversation with Caroline could be the doorway to networking, learning, and potentially even funding. Would they find it worthwhile enough to choose her as a vendor? The questions hung in the air, as tantalizing as the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Buried in hope and determination, Jessica marked the date down in her planner. It was time to take the next step, but the path to success would demand all of her strength and courage. She would need to confront every self-doubt and seize every opportunity. As she meticulously crafted her vision, the impending need to face Patricia's looming threat became an undeniable urgency. What would happen when she faced her next battleground, the community vendor market? Would her ideas soar or flounder when put to the test? The moment of truth was creeping closer, and with her heart pounding beneath the layered fragments of fear and hope, Jessica felt ready for whatever was to come. The anticipation of the vendor market loomed over Jessica like a storm cloud, dark yet electrifying. She spent her days at the diner, but her nights transformed into a whirlwind of preparation. Every spare moment became an opportunity to refine her ideas, experiment with recipes, and map out how her booth could stand out. She started to envision not just a selection of pastries, but an experience infused with warmth, laughter, and comfort, something her community could embrace as their own. In the solitude of her cramped apartment, surrounded by baking supplies and scribbles on loose papers, Jessica fought her fears head-on. Over and over, she challenged herself with questions. What made her unique? What did she intrinsically understand about people's needs? Suddenly, she realized her strength wasn't just in her culinary skills. It was about connection, the joy of service, the smiles her food could bring, and the warmth she could create were invaluable assets in her journey. The weeks leading up to the market were a mixture of excitement and sleepless nights. One evening, as the clock struck midnight, Jessica stood in her tiny kitchen, a warm glow from the overhead light casting shadows as she whisked batter. Frustration surged as her first batch of chocolate croissants fell flat. The dough refused to rise, and tears rolled down her cheeks, fueled by the overwhelming pressure she felt to succeed. But through her burst of defeat, a flicker of resilience sparked. "I won't quit," she whispered, as if daring the universe to oppose her. The dawn would bring a fresh start, and so she set to work again, tweaking the recipe and keeping empirical notes on her process. Soon, instead of floundering in doubt, she found herself in a rhythm, her hands moving deftly and confidently as she braved a new territory of baker and businesswoman. The next step required her to reacquaint herself with Mr. Anderson. The old man had treated her like family and shared his expertise freely. As she mentally rehearsed what she wanted to ask him, a knot of nervousness tightened in her stomach. Was it proper to ask for investment from someone who'd once been her mentor? Though uncertainty clouded her mind, her determination burned clearer than ever. She needed guidance. She owed it to Lily and herself to seize this moment. When she arrived at the small diner where Mr. Anderson used to work, it felt like stepping into a whirlwind of memories. The diner sported different owners now, and the menu had changed, but the nostalgia anchored her courage. After summoning the energy to reach out, she found him sitting alone at a booth. He looked older, more fragile than she remembered, yet his eyes sparkled with warmth as she approached. "Jessica, it's been a long time," he beamed. She took note of the gentle quirk of his lips. The familiarity eased her nerves, allowing her to share her aspirations openly. As they spoke, Mr. Anderson listened intently, offering advice and sharing stories of his own struggles and triumphs in the restaurant business. With each step he led her through, Jessica gained confidence. He talked about marketing, the importance of a unique brand, and even the potential pitfalls of managing a small food venture. And while her heart raced with the thrill of learning, it also sank with reminders of the hurdles she still had to face. As she wrapped up the conversation, Mr. Anderson offered her something practical. "Jessica, prepare a small sample of your best offerings, and I'll help you network before the vendor market." People love supporting a genuine story, but they need to taste the love behind it. The buoyance of his encouragement paired with a sense of obligation brought an overwhelming swell of gratitude. Still, a part of her couldn't shake the weight of looming fears of failure, of rejection. Returning home, Jessica spent the night baking more than just croissants. She crafted a collection of treats infused with memories, each tied to a story she would share about her journey. This wasn't merely about her. It was about creating a legacy. The day of the vendor market arrived, a mix of nerves and excitement crackling in her veins. With her carefully crafted goods in tow, Jessica felt the energetic pulse of the preparations around her. She stepped into the crowd, a swarm of voices and laughter, and eyed her spot among other stalls. Had she prepared enough? Were people ready to embrace her story and her passion? As she set down her goods, time slowed. The real test began, not just in sales, but in sharing herself. The stakes were high, and she felt the gravity of the moment. In that vibrant atmosphere brimming with possibility, all eyes were about to turn toward her. Would they see the fear and uncertainty, or would they embrace the warmth of her vision? As the market officially opened, Jessica took a deep breath, mentally steeling herself for the challenge ahead. She was ready to show the world her heart, but the question lingered in the air like the aroma of freshly baked goods. Would they accept it? Would they really see what she had to offer? The sounds around Jessica faded as she examined her booth, positioned between a bustling juice stand and a vendor selling artisan cheeses. The scent of her freshly baked goods mingled with the diverse aromas of the market. This was where she hoped to find her connection. Yet doubt gnawed at her, an uninvited guest that refused to soften its grip. As the crowd began to move, she arranged her pastries meticulously, recalling Mr. Anderson's advice. Presentation was crucial. Each item held not just flavor, but a story of struggle, persistence, and love. She carefully placed a small sign beside her offerings, reading, "Taste the Love." It embodied her journey and her desire to forge authentic connections. Yet, with every passing visitor, her confidence waned. Were they really here for her? The first few customers meandered by, voices light and laughter filling the air, while Jessica remained an observer, her heart racing in sync with the ticking seconds. Suddenly, a woman approached, drawn in by the richness in the air. Jessica's stomach flipped. This was it. "Hi there. What do you recommend?" the woman asked, genuine curiosity etched on her face. With a shaky breath, Jessica summoned her resolve. "The chocolate croissants are my specialty. They're filled with a rich chocolate cream and topped with sea salt. They're all about indulgence." She offered a small sample, remembering the late-night struggle to perfect the recipe. The woman took a bite, closing her eyes in delight. "This is wonderful. How did you come up with it?" Jessica felt warmth wash over her, something she hadn't expected. This was the moment, the chance to share herself. "It's inspired by my grandmother. She used to bake every Sunday, and those afternoons filled with stories and laughter were the happiest times of my life." The woman smiled, something in her deepening. "It's beautiful you keep that memory alive. I'll take two." And just like that, her first sale unfolded, opening a crack in the armor of anxiety she wore. As the market continued, expectations began to blend with reality. More people approached, animated stories and laughter flowing freely. Each interaction became a lesson, a varied thread she could weave through her offerings. The chocolates, the pastries, each item became a piece of her identity, articulated in flavor and warmth. Yet, an unsettling sensation rippled through her as the pace quickened. Did they care? Or were they merely passing through her space, a carousel of indifference spinning by? It was a lingering fear that the warmth she hoped to provide wasn't reaching as many ears as she'd envisioned. And then she saw him, a faced familiar, yet distanced, the owner of the competition booth across from hers, a slick operation with aggressive marketing tactics. "Look, if you need advice on how to sell, I have a few tips," he called out, drumming a finger on the side of his featureless cart, arrogance oozing from his posture. His swagger felt condescending. "I appreciate it," Jessica replied, her voice firm but her heart pounded with disbelief. Was he attempting to undermine her? Did he think she lacked the strength to stand in this battleground? As she retreated into her thoughts, a glimpse of her bakery vision surged through. The story, the love she reflected on everything she had poured into this moment. This man didn't know her journey, nor the resilience that had propelled her through adversity. Taking a deep breath, she smiled back at him, a hint of mischief in her expression. "Thank you for the offer, but I think my story speaks for itself." A small spark of realization ignited within her. She wasn't competing on the same ground as him. She was carving her niche through authenticity. The familiarity of vulnerability whispered to her resilience. With renewed purpose, Jessica leaped forward into the fray, all while keeping the vision of her booth a haven of warmth and connection front and center. With more customers stopping to sample her treats, she could see her confidence solidifying like the rising dough of her pastries. Moments later, as the afternoon sun cast a golden hue on the crowd, she made a choice that would alter everything going forward. It was time to step beyond merely selling. She sought to build lasting connections and forge a community. But just as these new insights began to settle, a sudden realization hit her squarely in the chest. Real connections came with risk. What if offering her heart made her vulnerable in ways she hadn't yet considered? As clarity sparked, the clamor around her no longer felt like a market but a crossroads, and the weight of the decision ahead weighed heavily on her mind. She wasn't merely here to sell pastries. She was committed to sharing herself and her legacy, but at what cost? The stakes were rising, and the ripple effects of her choices were about to unfold. As the crowd thrummed around her, Jessica braced for the challenge, knowing that the path forward would be anything but comfortable. Would she have the courage to fully reveal herself, or would she hold back just enough to protect her heart? The tension gripped her, whispering the hardest truth yet. The time had come to face her genuine self, and the outcome was uncertain. The moment stretched, suspended in the air like the fragrance of her pastries. Jessica's resolve hardened, an ember taking flame against the creeping shadows of doubt. She stared down the flowing current of voices and footsteps, realizing the emotional bridge she was trying to build was forged by authenticity, not mere salesmanship. With the abandonment of her previous anxieties, every person who approached her booth felt like a potential storyteller waiting to collide with her own. She quickly adjusted her apron, her small, embroidered logo, a delicate bakery charm, emboldening her more than any marketing strategy could. "Hi there. What are you baking today?" a college student asked, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she leaned forward with a curious tilt of her head. "I have a mix of sweet and savory," Jessica began to recount, feeling the rhythm of her voice steady. "The chocolate croissants, as well as savory rosemary and sea salt scones." The words rolled off her tongue, but it wasn't just the product she had prepared. It was the passion behind them that she chose to share today. "What's the story with these?" the student prodded, raising her brow with interest as she picked up a scone and examined it carefully. Jessica paused, a corner of her mouth lifting. "These remind me of walking through the woods with my grandfather. He'd pick fresh herbs, and we'd bake together. It turns into something magical when you mix memories with ingredients." There it was, the spark she craved, the connection grounded in shared experience. The student smiled, the scone in her hand now heavier with meaning. "I love that. I'll take one." In this moment of intermingled sincerity, Jessica realized the way her offerings transcended the physical. They invited stories, nostalgia, and a shared humanity. The transaction became richer than the simple exchange of goods. Yet, amidst her weaving connections, she couldn't shake the looming presence of the competitor across the way. He was busy overseeing his flashy setup, making deals with customers who seemed enamored by his glitzy pitches. The contrast stung, but it also seeded determination within her. Each interaction motivated her to amplify her authenticity, regardless of his tactics. "Have you considered any marketing strategies?" His voice boomed over the din, invasive yet infuriatingly confident. She gathered this was an attempt to rattle her, perhaps even lure her into self-doubt. "It isn't enough to just bake. You need a plan." Jessica clenched her jaw, maintaining her composure. "I believe in stories over spreadsheets. People want to feel connected." The fervor of her conviction surprised even her, an unexpected flare coming from the depths of her being. She turned her back on him, refocusing on the customers who had chosen to engage her instead. As the afternoon wore on and the sun dipped lower, a curious thought endowed her. What if she began collecting the stories of her customers? Each interaction could unravel a tapestry of memories, and perhaps she could consider those crossroads where her customers' lives intersected with her baking passion. It would deepen their connection, making her pastries more than just a product. They could be shared experiences that anchored her brand. When she noticed the petite girl tugging at her mother's side, peering curiously at the croissants, an epiphany sparked. "Would you like to try a sample?" Jessica leaned down, offering warmth and inclusion. The little girl nodded, eyes wide. "It's made with love and sweet dreams," Jessica added, leaning all the way into her vulnerability, inviting others to reciprocate. The girl took a hesitant bite, eyes lighting up as her mother chuckled, leaning in closer. "See, every pastry has a story," Jessica explained, her heart swelling as their shared laughter coursed through her like sunshine breaking through a cloudy day. The day wound down, her treats dwindling in number, yet her spirit surged. As she observed the tapestry of connections she had woven interspersed with confident exchanges, a mosaic growing throughout the day, a visceral realization settled in her heart. Every story shared empowered her to embrace the journey ahead fully. Looking across the aisle at her competitor, she felt no resentment, only a realization of her path's uniqueness. She didn't need to combat aggressive tactics. She needed to cultivate authenticity. The competition could not touch the individual resonance of trust she aimed to inspire within those who walked away with a piece of her heart in every pastry. But the revelation stirred a new question within her. Would she dare turn those intertwining stories of her past into something larger? Could she possibly encapsulate them into a book of recipes, each one paired with its personal tale? What if her baked creations could become a bridge, not just to customers, but into her own healing and self-discovery? As evening settled in, the sun casting long shadows, the thought lingered sweetly and messily like melted chocolate in the air. Jessica could see it now. The real journey hers was just beginning, and so too was the time to write a new chapter. Would she open herself up to the world more deeply, or bravely hold on to her past? Each decision ahead would test her resolve in ways she hadn't yet imagined. Jessica awoke the next day, the memory of the previous day's market still fresh in her mind, like the lingering scent of the pastry she had crafted. She felt invigorated, a quiet revolution had begun within her. Uncertainty that shadowed her in the past seemed to evaporate, replaced by an electric energy that surged through her veins. Today, she would take the first steps toward her newfound goal, to transform her connection with her customers into a tangible narrative. She hastily donned her apron, its fabric a familiar comfort, as she moved through her small yet functional kitchen. The early morning sunlight flooded through the window, illuminating flour dust motes floating in the air. In this space, where she endlessly experimented with flavors, fragrances, and textures, she felt at home. For the first time in a long while, however, the baking had transcended the mere task of creating delightful foods. It had become a vessel for storytelling. Instead of merely preparing bread and pastries, she began her day with a plan. She grabbed a notebook that had long lain unrecognized in the corner of her counter. It was an innocuous blue with frayed edges, yet it beckoned her with an urgency she could no longer ignore. Sitting at her worn wooden table, she took a moment to breathe deeply, feeling her heart pound against her ribs. This was momentous not only for her business but for her soul as well. She opened the notebook to the first blank page. As it stared back at her, she felt overwhelmed by the possibilities. Where to begin? She whispered. Then, she let her hand wander. She wrote down every story that came to her mind. Memories of baking with her grandfather, the sweet aroma of vanilla swirling through their kitchen, the laughter echoing like music. Each word she penned was a thread she would weave into her narrative. With each recollection, her focus sharpened. This was not just about her past. It was about blending her history with the stories of those who found their way to her booth. She scribbled notes about the college student who admired her scones, and how her delight reminded Jessica of her own youth, of the sheer joy of discovery. The kitchen, once a mere workspace, transformed into a sanctuary of inspiration. Ideas flowed like batter from a mixing bowl. Her heart raced at the potential of a cookbook. It could offer a taste of her world, inviting readers to savor memories and connect their own stories to the ingredients she cherished. But as she thought more about the project, an unsettling thought gnawed at her resolve. Would other people find her experiences compelling, or would her vulnerability be met with indifference? It was a fear that bubbled just under the surface, seeking to sabotage her aspirations. What if I fail? The anxiety whispered, as insidious as it was familiar. Determined to silence the voice, Jessica shook her head. She couldn't allow herself to be paralyzed by fear once again. With newly reinforced conviction, she decided to reach out to her customers directly. She needed more than her own experiences. She craved authenticity in the stories of others. Tomorrow, she decided, I will create a story wall at the market. She envisioned a canvas where customers could share their own anecdotes connected to her baking, both on paper and through spoken word, or their fondest memories of pastries. What stories did they have to tell? It was a notion that felt humbling and exciting. As she stood in her kitchen, the flour-dusted countertop a witness to her evolution, a flurry of determination surged within her. She would invite engagement, encourage dialogue, and in the process, cultivate a deeper bond with her customers. But the specter of her competitor loomed at the periphery. How would this experiment be perceived? Would her rivals dismiss her efforts as mere whimsy? Clenching her fists, she reminded herself that authenticity would always hold more weight than strategy. Walking away from traditional marketing tactics felt bold, but she knew the risk was necessary. As evening fell, she sketched her plans in a new outline for the story wall, a safe place for connection and remembrance. It echoed her growth. This was her moment to express who she was, to transform obstacles into stepping stones. Yet, as excitement fused with trepidation, she knew that stepping into this new territory would demand even greater courage than she had mustered before. Where could this new chapter lead her? And how would it reshape her view of not only her business, but her identity? The question lingered, almost tangible, as she prepared to embrace the leap of faith ahead. Would the synergy of her story and those of her customers lead to something greater than herself? Or would the whispers of doubt grow louder as she pushed forward? The next day would reveal all. Jessica arrived at the market early the next morning, her heart pounding with equal parts anticipation and anxiety. The vibrant colors of the stalls around her contrasted sharply with the dull grayness that threatened to creep back in. As she approached her booth, lined with her exquisite pastries and freshly baked bread, she could feel the weight of her plan bearing down on her. Did she really have the courage to transform her small corner of the market into a place for shared stories? Determined not to back down, Jessica set up her booth with meticulous care. She aligned her pastries in an inviting manner, placing her scones and croissants into neat rows. But this day would not be just about selling. It would be about inviting connection. She placed the story wall behind her, an oversized canvas decorated with strands of colorful ribbons, sticky notes, and pens for shoppers to share their memories. As the first customers trickled in, she felt a rush of adrenaline. They browsed her goods, but Jessica waited for the right moment to introduce her idea. Eventually, a couple approached her booth. The woman smiled as she perused the pastries. With a burst of courage, Jessica said, "Would you like to share a memory linked to your favorite pastry? I'm creating a story wall today." The woman, intrigued, shared the tale of her grandmother's cinnamon rolls, how they would often bake together on rainy afternoons. Jessica listened intently, feeling the warmth of connection grow. She encouraged her to write it down, handing her a pen, and the joy in the woman's eyes sent a wave of relief over Jessica. This was working. However, as more people stopped by to engage, she noticed others lurking near her competitor's booth. The elegant setup of her biggest rival, Lila, was pristine, drawing customers like moths to a flame. Jessica's heart sank as she watched people flock away from her offerings towards Lila's flashier display. For a moment, doubt clawed at her. What if her authentic approach wasn't enough to compete? With firm resolve, she shook off the nagging thoughts. This wasn't just about the sales. It was about creating a community. Each note pinned to her story wall spoke louder than any marketing gimmick could. One by one, customers began to share stories, each a testament to the bond formed through food. A little boy recounted how he recognized the scent of fresh cookies only his home. An elderly man recalled the bittersweet memory of his wife teaching him how to bake. Each story added a layer of richness to the narrative she was weaving. As the morning wore on, something remarkable happened. Customers who had only come for a pastry left feeling profoundly connected, not just to Jessica's baking, but to each other. Conversations flared up, and laughter erupted, filling the market with an energy she had long yearned for. Jessica realized this experiment was growing beyond her initial vision. It was about creating a tapestry of collective memories. But the cheers of success were soon met with the presence of Lila, who approached with a confident smile, flaunting a new marketing tactic that boasted about a special discount, all while subtly dismissing Jessica's initiative as a nice little community gimmick. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, and Jessica felt the familiar sting of competition, a reminder that doubt was never far behind. "Good for you, Jess," Lila said, "but don't forget, at the end of the day, it's about profits." The implication hung thick in the air, and Jessica forced a smile, feeling stripped of her resolve. Had she made a mistake in prioritizing emotional connection over traditional business success? The thought threatened to shake her newfound foundation. As Lila sauntered away, Jessica clamped down on her rising frustration, the fiery determination igniting again. Her journey had only just begun. The fear of failure simmered beneath the surface, but this time she would not let it overpower her vision. She'd been tracking the responses on her story wall, and the stories were accumulating more than just words. They were her evolving identity as an artist, a baker, and an entrepreneur. Could this be the authentic edge she needed to truly forge a connection and ultimately a lasting business? Jessica steeled herself against the doubt, her thoughts overflowing with possibilities. This was her chance to defy the odds, to redefine success on her own terms. But would her strategy hold up against Lila's relentless tactics, or would it crumble as the competition intensified? The day was still unfolding, and she braced for what challenges lay ahead. A new chapter in her journey was dawning, and she could feel the stakes rising. What true stories might emerge, reshaping not only her business, but her very essence? The questions lingered like the scent of freshly baked bread, tantalizing and filled with promise. As the day progressed, Jessica felt the pull of her dreams clashing with the heavy realities of competition. The laughter and stories that filled her booth, vibrant and genuine, contrasted sharply with the calculated efficiency radiating from Lila's stand. Could she really establish a place in this world where connection reigned over profit? The familiar knot of doubt tightened in her stomach. A surge of customers continued to meander through the market, but she couldn't shake the weight of Lila's words. Profits mattered, didn't they? Jessica took a deep breath and forced a smile, reminding herself that she was building something real against all odds. Each sticky note on her story wall represented a small victory, a testament to the human experience that seemed to resonate deeper than any advertisement. Yet, Lila's tactic was a brutal reminder of how easy it was to be overlooked. Her booth was now offering a side deal. Buy one pastry, get another free if customers shared story. It was clever, and it drew a crowd. Jessica watched closely as laughter erupted from Lila's corner, fueling a fire of competition again. Just when she believed she had carved out a niche, Lila's cold pragmatism pierced through her confidence. The afternoon wore on, and Jessica's mind raced. Was her strategy too emotionally driven to sustain a viable business? With each story written on her wall, could she counter Lila's commercial charm? In a moment of sudden clarity, Jessica decided that it was time to confront this challenge creatively, to find value in her unique approach and elevate it. Maybe if I blended the two worlds, she murmured to herself, eyes scanning her pastries and the story wall. What if I framed the stories better? What if I used personal narratives to showcase my baking, connecting flavors with memories? With renewed vigor, she began to craft narratives for her pastries, labeling them with the stories shared by her customers. Each pastry would come with its own tale, transforming them into not just food, but vessels of memory. She penned a small note, the cinnamon roll of memories baked with warmth like family afternoons. As she introduced her new approach to those still lingering at her booth, the charm worked like magic. People were enchanted not only by the treats, but the narratives that suddenly had context, histories that people could relate to. The essence of each pastry became a bridge to their own experiences, igniting connections that expanded beyond typical transactions. Her booth evolved into a storytelling platform where laughter and sharing flourished. Even people who had come from Lila's corner began to drift towards Jessica, captivated by the personal touches and emotional weight of her offerings. Yet, amidst the burgeoning success, Jessica felt a simmering tension in her back. Lila was watching, her expression shifting from curiosity to annoyance. The more people engaged with Jessica's narratives, the more her rival's smile faded. Jessica noticed Lila whispering into her phone, taking notes, likely planning her next strike. That evening, exhaustion settled in as the market closed. Jessica counted her sales, and though she felt proud of her creative evolution, Lila's looming presence weighed on her mind. Had her changes made enough of an impact to sustain her vision? Could she continue to innovate in a space so saturated with conventional tactics? With these uncertainties swirling, Jessica found herself feeling both triumphant and vulnerable. She'd begun to carve a niche, a framework for success that felt authentically hers. But in challenging Lila's methods, she sparked a countermove that could obliterate her progress. As she surveyed her story wall at twilight, new ideas ignited behind her eyes. If tonight proved anything, it was the power of adaptability. What might her response to Lila's dissatisfaction look like? And how could it further enrich her offerings? The challenge had presented itself, and now the question loomed. What unforeseen complexities awaited, and how would she navigate the impending confrontation with Lila? The essence of her mission gave rise to new possibilities, but the fire of competition was only just beginning. Jessica awoke the next day with renewed focus, her determination hardening like the dough she would soon need. The market was set to open again, and Lila's recent tactics hung heavily in the air, challenging, yet inspiring her to plan her next move. Every story she had collected felt like a thread of shared humanity, and she would not allow this to fade against competition. She spent the early morning finalizing the renovation of her booth. One of her new ideas was to create a rotating display board featuring the stories that had been shared at the market. Each pastry would be accompanied by a heartfelt excerpt revealing the connection behind it. This would not only enhance the emotional experience, but also transform her offerings into companions on a journey through memory. As she prepared her pastries, she felt a surge of pride. The chocolate croissants, cinnamon rolls, and scones were no longer just baked goods. They took on new life as vessels of connection. Each completed batch was imbued with stories and laughter conducive to a community feel, a tapestry woven not only for consumption, but for connection. Once she set up her booth, she could feel the energy buzzing around her. Patrons began arriving, but what she noticed most was the curiosity sparked by her story wall. The vibrant colors of sticky notes emblazoned with snippets of memories drew people in, enticing them to read what others had shared. "Do you know the story behind the pumpkin spice muffins?" one woman asked, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. Jessica felt a rush of excitement. "Absolutely. Those muffins are flavored by a memory of a mother and daughter baking together every fall, sharing stories over a warm oven. I infused the spices of the season to embody that joy." The woman's appreciative smile said that all this was more than a transaction. It was a shared experience, deepening at the very moment she processed an order. As she spoke, more people gathered, lending ears as Jessica recounted tales, connecting flavors with life's tapestry of moments. But Lila was not to be sidelined. When she spotted Jessica gathering a crowd, she unleashed her typical bravado, slashing prices on her baked offerings as she shouted promotions, cutting into the budding conversations around Jessica's booth. The stakes escalated, but Jessica remained unfazed. "Your pastries are probably lovely, but what is the story?" A customer mused, drawn back into Jessica's narrative. With her stand imbued with authenticity and warmth, Jessica could see engagement blossom. The stories were grounding, creating a space where customers felt valued beyond the food. As the market flowed through set hours, the true victory crystallized. Jessica's commitment to connection had paid off. Customers not only bought pastries, but lingered to share their own stories, adding their voices to her wall and cultivating a burgeoning sense of belonging. Reflecting on her journey, Jessica realized she didn't just endure, she embraced transformation. She had unearthed her skills, built confidence, and channeled authenticity into success. The recognition she received from enthusiastic customers toppled previous doubts about her capabilities. The confrontation with Lila still felt imminent. Would she continue to respond aggressively? Or would she begin to understand the community she was fostering? As the sun dipped below the horizon, the day closed with a sense of empowerment coursing through Jessica. Sales had exceeded those from the previous market day, and each pastry represented more than profit. It symbolized a journey of self-discovery and community connection. Tonight, she decided she would spend the evening drafting letters to local businesses, sharing her insights, and inviting them to partake in the narrative building. If there was something she learned, it was that isolated experiences could flow into something much greater, her vision to expand her story wall beyond the market, giving rise to a brand steeped in authentic connection. Jessica glanced over at the filled story wall, and smiles broke out. Across her face, each note was a vignette from life, a reminder of how far she had come. She felt anchored, not merely as a baker, but a storyteller eager to share her message with the world. She was no longer weighed down by fear of competition or the creeping suffocation of doubt. Instead, she was crafting a legacy, a reminder that communal experiences, akin to warm pastries fresh from the oven, could nourish the soul when infused with love. With visions of expansion dancing in her mind, Jessica knew this was the start of something extraordinary beyond her expectations. The realization washed over her. She had cultivated her own space, one where stories intertwined with resilience, triumphing over challenges that once felt insurmountable. The potential of her journey sparked within her, igniting the flame that would light her path forward toward a future filled with both opportunity and connection. This was her moment of triumph. She truly had achieved a sense of belonging within both herself and the community she was now creating. And as Jessica stood amidst the warmth of the market, she felt proud not only for what she had created, but for the woman she had become. Today marked not just a turning point, but a powerful reaffirmation. Jessica was no longer a mere survivor in her circumstances. She was a warrior, beautifully thriving with purpose and ready to forge ahead. You need to subscribe now to catch every step of Jessica's incredible journey. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to keep empowering stories that change lives, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who could use a spark of transformation. Comment with your reactions and theories about the journey, and be part of our story.